So let's analyze the aftermath of Gaza. But first we need some more background. I have another video on this, but now just to recap. Well, first of all, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to unilaterally disengage from Gaza after the Palestinian Authority was installed, and the idea was that the people could govern themselves. But it was a very hard decision, since there were 9,000 Israeli citizens who had been living there for a generation, and 21 communities had to be dismantled. But they did it. And then in June of 2007, Hamas wrestled control of the Gaza Strip from the Palestinian Authority in bloody fighting. Now, Hamas is considered to be a terrorist organization by the United States and most civilized nations. It's openly calling for the destruction of Israel. And since that time, about 10,000 rockets have been launched, 3,000 alone in 2008. Even one rocket would be considered an act of war by any country. But this is thousands and thousands of rockets coming from Gaza under the Hamas Authority to Israel. So what's Israel supposed to do? Well, Article 51 of the UN Charter is quite clear that any nation has the right to engage in self-defense against armed attack. And there is no legal equivalence between the deliberate killing of civilians, which is what Hamas has been doing by lobbing its rockets into Israel, into targeted killing of Israeli cities without any strategic significance, and the targeted killing of Hamas militants. The law is clear that any number of combatants can be killed to prevent the killing of even one innocent civilian. Now, Israel underwent an unprecedented effort, under unprecedented length, to avoid killing civilians. Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas of the world, and they continued to put their rocket launchers and their missiles in schools and hospitals, even in mosques. But it's really unique in the history of warfare that Israel, in its respect for human rights, dropped tens of thousands of leaflets and made thousands of phone calls trying to tell people to leave areas where they were going to attack. Now, the world's most insistently demanded an immediate ceasefire, but the same world did not offer one condemnation of a single one of the 10,000 missiles that fell. Hamas committed at least 6 war crimes. Number one, it deliberately targeted civilians. Number two, it launched attacks from inside civilian areas, like houses, schools, mosques, and hospitals. 3, it abused international symbols, like using ambulances to transport fighters. 4, bringing children into armed conflict. 5, inciting to genocide through its systematic 8-year-long attack on civilians. And finally, not allowing Red Cross or any other international player access to an Israeli soldier who they've held for 2.5 years. There's no demand for legal equivalence in causality in warring parties. In other words, neither Israelis' use of warplanes against rockets or his having suffered far fewer casualties make it guilty of disproportionality. The law of war takes into account that when attacking military targets, civilians may be hurt. But to insist that attacking forces may take steps to ensure that civilian casualties will not be disproportionate to the military advantage achieved is... Now, for example, the attacking force could warn civilians to leave the battle zone, and it must use weapons capable of pinpointing the military targets. Israel did both. IDF did its best to adhere strictly to the laws of modern warfare. And just to show you that this comes from an impartial source, Colonel Richard Kemp, a former commander of the British force in Afghanistan, told the BBC, not known for its support of Israel, "I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of warfare when an army has made more efforts to reduce civilian casualties and deaths of innocent people than the IDF did in Gaza." Now, just think about when America, in Operation Phantom Fury in the city of Fallujah in 2004, followed 9 days of fierce ground fighting. Of the 2,000 mosques in the city, 66 were destroyed because they were used to hold weapons. 30,000 buildings were destroyed, and civilians, 6,000 were killed. America did that in Fallujah, and America wasn't even under direct threat at the time. Now, had the IDF used less firepower, it would have caused more casualties and greatly undermined the operation's deterrent effect. Everyone in the region is watching us now. Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran. I think the show of force, this quote says, was very important in creating deterrence. Now, you have Qassam missiles fired from people's homes. They fired from rooftops, schools, shops. The mosques were full of weapons, ammunition, explosives, and missiles. Now, you should know, too, Israel has a very diverse population, and 94% of the Jewish public, 94%, unheard of, supported the war. The peace movement, basically, in Israel is really trying to figure things out because they all supported this. They knew what had to be done. This fellow named Yaron Ezrahi, a political science professor, said the two main wings of the Israeli peace movement have been profoundly disabled by Hamas. They used to believe land for peace, but that was destroyed because they conceded territory to the Palestinians, and all they got were missiles in return. So it's land for missiles. And I think it's interesting to note, too, that there's not one single UN condemnation of the missiles from Hamas, while they keep tripping over themselves to come up with condemnations of Israel. Now, one final thought. The main problem facing Israel and the international community is the rehabilitation effort and how to prevent Hamas from hijacking relief supplies. For example, Israel approved the dispatch of equipment for water purification, but pipes it sent quickly disappeared, lifted by militiamen for the manufacture of new Qassam rockets. So what are they supposed to do? It's clearly Israel did everything it could to prevent civilian casualties. Any civilized country will do what it needs to do to protect itself. And this is clearly 10,000 rockets from Hamas is an intolerable situation.